Hello everyone, my name is Chris Nickel and I'm going to be presenting the final report for the Ariadne project, Scent of Science. This project was envisioned to create a methodology for finding science resources for space missions based off of inspiration of scent tracking organisms, whereas in most cases, whatever the scientific point of interest that we're looking for gives some sort of clue or cue, and we're going to be looking for these clues in the same way that organisms sometimes try to find sources of whatever concentration they're looking for. Three sensible scenarios where this methodology might be used are looking for methane on Mars, trying to target a landing site on Enceladus close to one of the geysers on the southern pole, and looking for hydrothermal vents with an underwater vehicle on the moon Europa. For this project, we looked into modeling two of the environments for these scenarios, the Mars methane scenario and the Enceladus plume scenario. And then we looked into some preliminary results for localization inside of a plume and controlling a vehicle towards the source. The Mars methane model is used by solving the diffusion evection reaction partial differential equation. We use a single source which puts out puffs of methane at a defined frequency by the simulation. This methane travels through the simulated area via a wind model, which acts on three different spatial scales. The first scale moves the entire plume downwind, just as an evection. We then have vortex inside the model, which is responsible for moving the individual puffs of methane off the center line. And the third case is a stochastic turbulence, which is responsible for changing the shape of these methane plumes as they travel downwind. We then compare the statistics from our model to those of terrestrial experiments and models from other research groups. Here are some of the results of our methane model. Some key points of the model that are necessary for the realism are empty spaces where there is no concentration in the middle of our plume at instantaneous points. This is called intermittency. The second point is that at any point inside of the methane plume, the instantaneous concentration of methane does not necessarily point towards the source of the methane. And this is one of the other challenges that we see in real life plume tracking problems. The Enceladus plume is a little bit different from the Mars methane plume in the sense that it is less turbulent and it's more structured in the sense that it is a continuous plume. One of the things that makes it a challenging plume is that it is made up of multiple jets which diffuse into a big plume, as you can see in this picture. Unlike other Enceladus models that are concentrated on the actual plume, where the Cassini spacecraft has done multiple flybys, our model is more concerned with the individual jets which we will be targeting during a descent mission. Our model is static in the sense that it doesn't change for a particular scenario. This is because our mission time is much shorter than any changes seen in the plume. However, there's much to be found out about this plume, and therefore we have a lot of stochastic and random processes in our model to represent the unknowns. Of these unknowns are the positions of the actual jets. Although we know some of them, there's still a lot that we don't know. The second one is how tidal stresses acting on the moon actually affect the ejection rates of the individual jets. And so we have some of the random processes to take these unknowns into account. However, the stresses acting on the moon definitely play a role into how the ejection of different sources. In this chart here, you can see an example of some of the jet sources and the stresses acting on the plume. When stresses are tensile, sources end up ejecting material. When stresses are compressive, ejection tends to cease until you're on the other side of the orbit. For the control side of things, we attempted to replicate some of the behavior seen in moths, as moths are one of the scent tracking organisms that use scent in order to find potential mates. various studies have been done on moths and their odor tracking behaviors. And the scene is that there's two really distinct behaviors depending on what type of odor plume they travel in. For well-defined meandering plumes, called ribbon plumes, it's found that moths tend to move very slowly and zigzag back and forth across the center line of the plume until it reaches its source. In turbulent plumes that are more like our Mars methane model, where there's lots of gaps with very clean air, moths tend to cast crosswind with successively increasing distances until they come in contact with some sort of positive measurement. Once they detect whatever it is that they're looking for, they quickly burst upwind until they lose sight of the concentration. Then they begin this casting pattern again until they find the source. We tended to try to capture this behavior inside of a recurrent neural network. We use the recurrent neural network because it is a reactionary control, just like the moths. And one of the advantages of using this type of thing is that it would be egocentric, and neural networks are known very well to generalize behaviors. So although we'll try to teach these two moth-like behaviors to our neural network, we're hoping that the neural network will generalize to new patterns of inputs and therefore still be able to find an odor source in an unknown environment. We have some preliminary results where we're able to travel somewhat inside the plume. However, we're still continuing to work on this these scenarios. And I'm going to have my my friend Guido here talk about some of the work done at the ESA ACT.
So I'm Guido de Kroon, a research fellow AI at the Advanced Concepts team of the European Space Agency. And what you're looking at here on the screen is one of the simulations that we've done. We've explored, although we've collaborated during the project, we've explored a slightly different strategy to have the robot localize the odor source. The underlying idea was the same. We want to use a simple controller, low computational complexity, with no absolute map of the environment. But what was different is that we used also neural networks, but we evolved them without telling them how they should do the task. So the idea there was the behavior of the moth might be optimal for the moth, but perhaps not for the rover. And we wanted to use semi-supervised learning. So now I'll play it once more and I'll explain a little bit what it's doing. If it's not sensing any of the methane, it's making a zigzagging behavior obliquely to the wind, not as orthogonal as the moth, but it's a similar kind of behavior. And then what happens is it senses the plume and it will approach the source and the goal area via the outside. So this is the current state of matters. We have some positive results on pretty difficult cases with some turbulence, and we will continue together with Carleton University to get perhaps even better results. So that's the Scent of Science project.